Baker coming on. We can just wait one more minute so we can let Ms. Tubman join us. Tubman is not on, but we have enough. We have a quorum, so we can go ahead and officially get started. So we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, Monday, March 8th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. for our Eastpointe Board of Ethics meeting. And I'm going to ask Mr. Gatson if he will call the roll.
Board Member Baker.
Present.
Board Chair Muniz.
Present.
Vice Board Chair Jones.
Present.
Board Member Sasic.
Present. Eastpointe.
Sorry, I should ask everyone. And give me one moment. Ms. Tubman is joining us now. Ms. Tubman? Is she there, Ms. Tubman?
She's still, it says she's connecting to audio, so it may take a moment.
Okay.
Oh, and she's muted now.
Ms. Tubman, if you can hear us, you can unmute.
I can hear you.
Okay, we're in the middle of roll call and you're next on the list, so Ms. Board Member Tubman.
Here.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. Sorry about that. Interruptions in the background. All right, has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes that Mr. Gatson sent out?
Yes,
Yes.
but Chairman Muniz, I do have one question. In looking at the minutes, I did notice that the conversation that took place right before the hearing of the public was omitted from the minutes. I don't know if that's a technicality because there was no action on it, but it was a discussion during the meeting. So I'm not sure how that works.
Okay, are you offering that as a, would you like the minutes corrected to include that?
Well, if we correct it, what we would have to do is we'd probably have to go back to the video because I can't remember all of the dialogue that took place during that conversation. So, but I mean, the minutes are supposed to reflect what was discussed during the meeting. So I do think they need to be amended, but I don't think they can be amended at this moment. So if Mr. Gaskin could amend them and maybe we can approve them at our next meeting.
Okay, is everyone in favor of that? And I guess we should make that as an actual motion to, so do you have a motion for us to delay approval of the minutes until the next meeting?
I would make that motion then, just so that the minutes can be updated for what was left out.
Okay, is there a second?
Well, I do have one question. Because that was a conversation, not really pertaining to anything specific on that agenda, I'm wondering, do we actually have to add that as part of the minutes? Or because I know it was just kind of a concern that you had, but it wasn't actually anything that going along with what we had on the agenda. So I'm just for clarity, I don't know if we actually have to.
And I'll be honest to say, I don't recall if there was anything, I don't recall that there was anything actionable that took place in that part of the meeting. But because I don't know that for certain, then I don't want to, yeah. Okay, so there wasn't.
Okay.
No, there was nothing that we made up. Nobody made a motion. Nobody voted on anything. It was just a discussion of a concern.
Okay, moving forward then. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that being said, are there any other corrections or requests for corrections to the minutes? All right, if not, hearing none, the minutes will be approved as they stand. All right. Or as written, since we've all had an opportunity to see them and we haven't had them read out. At this time, we are going to open the floor for a hearing of the public.
Madam Chair,
Yes, yes, sir.
do we get an actual motion and second to approve the minutes?
We can. I actually had looked that up to make sure that whether I needed to do an actual motion. And according to what I understand from the Sturgis Rules of Order, the chair can just approve the minutes, but I have no problem doing an actual motion.
Okay.
So
Well, that's okay.
why don't we do that just to be sure that we cover all bases? I have no problem with that. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
Second.
All right, having a motion and a second for approval of the minutes as written. Is there any discussion? I think so. All right, so the minutes are approved as written. All right, moving on, we'll now open the floor for, oh, I was supposed to do, I keep skipping over, y'all gotta stop me. I keep skipping over parts. Secretary, can you do a call of the roll? You all excuse my, I'm still learning.
All right. Board Member Baker,
Yes.
Board Member Jones. I'm sorry, Vice Chair Jones,
Yes.
Board Member Sassick,
No.
Board Member Tubin,
Yes.
and Board Chair Muniz.
Yes. All right, so now the minutes are approved as written. Okay, moving on now to the hearing of the public, and I appreciate you guys being so kind as we are all learning in this process. But moving on to the hearing of the public, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak at this time? And I would just like to first of all say thank you to those members of the public who are attending, and I would ask that you would limit your comments to this board to 3 minutes. Also, if you have an actionable concern that you would like for this board to review, we do have an actual complaint form, and we would ask that you would complete that and submit it to the city, and then it would be forwarded to us. But at this time, we will open the floor for the hearing of the public. Mr. Gasson, do you have anyone?
I am showing no one with the hand raised, or I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay.
So we are good.
Okay. At this time, we will move forward to the next item on the agenda, which is a review of our last meeting's motion. There was a motion made at the end of our last meeting to, and I'm just gonna go back and pull up my exact notes. There was a motion made by Mr. Sasek and seconded by Mr. Baker to indicate that since the evidence proved that there was disrespect, that the mayor would be responsible for a public apology, apologizing to Councilman DeMonico and to the citizens of Eastpointe, knowing that if this behavior continues, then the guidelines provided to the Board of Ethics, then under the guidelines provided to the Board of Ethics would include censure or fines that could occur at a later date. Since that meeting, it has come to our attention that the provision under which we made that motion and approved that motion is not actionable. So at this time, I'd like to know if there is a motion to rescind that prior motion.
I believe I made that motion, not knowing that it was an error. So if in fact I was the one that initiated the motion, I would move that we rescind it.
I will support that.
Okay. At this time, it has been moved and seconded to rescind. Is there any discussion? All right. I would just like to say, in this regard, going back through the guidelines of the ordinance, the biggest reason that it needed to be rescinded is because 2-99 is not an actionable provision under the ordinance. Our actionable provision is 2-102. And so because there's nothing about respectfulness or a violation of respectfulness in the actionable portion of the ordinance, that necessitated the reason for it being rescinded. Any other discussion or questions at this time? All right, can we have a vote on this? I'm sorry, can we have a vote on the motion to rescind our prior move to request that the mayor be responsible for a public apology, apologizing to Councilman DeMonico and to the citizens of Eastpointe, knowing that if this behavior continues, then under the guidelines provided to the ethics board, censure or fines could occur at a later date. Mr. Gasson, can you call the roll?
Sure. Board Member Sassett,
Yes.
Board Member Baker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Jones,
Yes.
Board Member Tubin,
Yes.
and Chair Muniz.
Yes. All right. Thank you. The motion is rescinded. The motion to rescind is carried, I should say. At this time, I want to open the floor up for board comments. So if we could begin with Mr. Jones, do you have any comments?
The only thing about the complaint form, I think we need to add something on the complaint form about falsification. Remember what me and you discussed before that, and so we won't be having a lot of vigorous complaints just being rolled up for no reason. Then we don't have a lot of meetings with a lot of complaints that are, or maybe it's something in it to where we can review the complaints where I not necessarily have, well, I guess we would have to meet then. But I just think something should be added at the bottom of that complaint form about falsification or something to that nature.
Okay. Okay. All right. Mr. Sasek, do you have any comments at this time?
I want to apologize for any firestorm I may have caused on Saturday, but my concern was after I saw your email, Chairman Muniz, I did go back and look, and yes, I found in my Eastpointe Ethics Board file that I keep the email, we're asking if we were available for March 8th and also asking the city if they were available. But when I was going back and looking, I never saw where there was a true confirmation notifying all of us that we were having a meeting tonight until we got the email early Saturday morning. And that's what started all of that for me. So I would just appreciate in the future, if we have something coming up, once we pull the availability and come to a consensus date, that we're all notified right away that on this date, we are going to have a meeting at such and such a time, and then making sure that we do get the agendas and everything ahead of time in a timely manner. That's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tubin, did you have any comments tonight?
Yes, I do. I was thinking that since we initially had talked about section 299, number 5 specifically about respectfulness, and how these are more or less suggestions to employees of the city as far as their behavior. I think we could possibly request of the city council to change that portion within the guidelines to make it to where it's not just a suggestion, but it's a requirement. Because I know myself, if I'm disrespectful in any way to a student or a parent, I don't have a job. And it's not, it's not a suggestion by my principal, it's a requirement. that I'm respectful and I act accordingly and I represent the school in the best light possible. So could we possibly do that? Request of the city council, whether, they agree to it or not, but make that request.
Okay. To ask that they add it to provision 2-101.
Right, because how it's written now, as I'm understanding, that it's more a suggestion that the city would like all employees to be accountable and to be respectful. It's a suggestion. How about making it that it is mandatory that all employees have to abide by that? Then we won't have this problem again.
If I may,
Yes.
we already have provisions for all employees to be respectful and to be courteous. We've got provisions that all of our employees have to adhere to. In this case, you're talking about an elected official who is not an employee. Their employer are the people of the community. And the only way that something like that, as Ms. Tubman said, if she's disrespectful or treats her students, in the improper way according to their guidelines, that's the end of her job. That doesn't typically occur with elected officials unless there is a provision in the charter. And we have no such provision. Excuse me.
So you're saying that the provision would need to be in the charter, not in this particular ordinance?
Well, if you were to say the person were disrespectful and you wanted to terminate an elected official, the only way that could happen is it would have to be part of the charter.
Right.
The other option is what you're doing right now, which is more of a recognition of behavior and, approval or disapproval of such behavior. But other than that, you don't have a lot of teeth.
Exactly.
Got a question for Ms. Doom. Me and Rob, we had a conversation in the previous meeting before. Then I was maybe I'm under the misinterpretation, but as far as this code of conduct, that applies to city employees, because I know y'all probably have your own disciplines as well, but does it apply to officials as well?
Well, it does apply to the elected officials because you've created this ethics board with a code of conduct.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that an elected official would be treated in a different way than an employee would.
Right.
An employee can have disciplinary action leading up to and including termination.
Right.
Whereas an elected official can only be terminated, unless they do something, a felony or do something terrible, then the state could do so, but it has to be very, very egregious. It's bottom line is, and I know this from being a former elected official, the voters are our bosses for any elected official.
So the ethics code applies to all city officials as well.
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
We
So that's what I assumed I read. Yes.
Oh yeah.
See, that's why I was having a little thought process. That can be more complaints, not just from the city council and the mayor. We talking about the whole entire.
Oh yeah.
That's what I was trying to explain. We need to critique that complaint form a little bit more because it does affect city officials as well. That was my consumption, so I wanted to clear it up.
Right.
And Ms. Doom, if I'm correct too, at the beginning of the ethics code, it does also stipulate that any appointed board members, commission members, and that also fall under the city's code of ethics.
Right.
Okay.
We actually all do. It's just how we deal with it and how we, our expectations are the same for everyone. That does not change whether you're elected, appointed, or hired. But how you deal with that are just completely different. I have a mechanism for all hired individuals on how we deal with behavior. And people who are appointed, as you know, to boards and commissions can find themselves unappointed by the council or, whoever's doing the appointing. So it's just how you handle it and how you deal with it is a little different for each group. But the expectation is the same for all of us.
So Ms. Doom, that being said, I have a quick question.
Sure.
with respect to elected officials in particular, because that's kind of a specialized group in terms of who their boss is.
Yep.
Is it possible to have some type of clarified provision within the ordinance that I know that city council is the one that has to approve that and put that in, but is it possible to have some type of clarified provision in the ordinance to explain how this ordinance applies to city officials?
We certainly, and I'll take a note and speak with our attorney about that.
And then I guess to dovetail on the back of that, because there's a list of provisions under 2-99s that says this is the policy.
Right.
Is there a way to ensure that everything that is in the policy is also under 2-101 and 2-103 as something that's governed, as opposed to it just being, well, this is policy, but you can't really do anything about it? Because then it makes complaints that come on matters of policy moot for us to meet and discuss.
It does in many ways. It certainly allows you to address a complaint and address the behavior or actions of an elected official. From there, it's more of a public show of no confidence of the type of behavior that if there's validity to the complaint, but to actually create some kind of a disciplinary action, that's definitely out of my wheelhouse, because I can only speak from my own experience as being an employee, being an elected official, and now appointed. Yeah, we've consequences,
Right.
but how they are applied are differently for each group.
Right. I think even if it was just clarity to say, if this, then that. So yeah, we as a board may not be able to censure someone or assert a fine, but if you find that subject a city official is in violation of the policy provision, then you would refer it to city council for their action. I think if there was just that clarification of where our teeth lie, if that makes sense.
Oh, I understand. It's awkward because you've got an ethics, policy, and yet bringing it to council is perfectly fine, making them aware of your findings, yay or nay, or anything in between. And it's up to the council to almost take it from there if they'd like to bring it publicly, if they'd like to publicly censure a person verbally. But,
Right.
I guess the attorney would have to speak. I just have not seen it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think I'm just thinking from the standpoint that even from the standpoint of a public person, not as a member of public, not so much as my role on the board, I would find it hard to have confidence in a board that exists to keep our city ethical, that really doesn't have clear guidelines as to how they can do that.
Well, if I may real quick, on that issue, what happens under section 2-99, where it talks about a general code of conduct or how elected officials and board members are supposed to behave? It's a thing that's understood, but there, like we said, there's no governance that we have over that. What will tend to happen, and I've talked to the city attorney about it on a couple different occasions. Because what tends to happen if somebody is rude, that is not technically a violation of ethics. That's just rude behavior or disrespect. And that will create a slippery slope. If we start trying to tell people what they can and can't say, as far as, what may be rude to me might not be rude to someone else. Or if someone hears me and one of you guys talking and we're yelling at one another, and they may not even know what we're yelling about or why we have escalated tones, and they deem it to be rude, it's going to open a can of worms, because now you can't say anything, because anything can now be deemed rude or disrespectful. So like Ms. Doom was saying, the policy is written, and there's just different ways of handling when we find a violation. But ethical violations would be things like soliciting, asking for free things or things of monetary value, or lobbying to get somebody a job, or voting or somebody to get a job. Like if one of my children stood to gain employment by a vote of mine, then those are things that'll be ethical violations. But I would caution to be very careful about that section 2-99 of trying to control what people say, because they do have freedom of speech and they do have the freedom to express themselves. And if, as funny as this may sound, is if they want to yell at one another because that's just how they communicate, so be it. They have that right to do it. And it's really up to the public to decide what they want to do with elected officials when they see that type of behavior. But I would just caution to really be careful about trying to control, what someone says. I mean, we all have an expectation. We all know what's deemed proper protocol or decorum in a meeting, talking in respectful tones, keeping the escalation down. But to try to be able to put ourselves in a position to impose a fine, whether it be a public apology or a monetary fine, I think that's a very slippery slope, and I would just caution about, before going down that trail.
If I may, I'd like to make it clear from my standpoint. I'm not saying at all that we should be, that we have to be the ones to impose any sort of fine, because I agree with Ms. Doom that, especially when you're talking about elected officials, it's the people's choice. But I do think there needs to be that clarification, because if we are all, smart, able-bodied people who read this same ordinance and we had questions about it, then your everyday member of the public citizen of Eastpointe who would see this would have the same questions if there's not that clarity. So even if it's nothing more than the clarification to say, if this behavior happens, this is how the Board of Ethics will or will not handle it, or this isn't governed by the Board of Ethics. I just think we need that clarity so we know where our boundaries are. And I think that Mr. Albright, being the city attorney, knowing the applicable laws from the state of Michigan, would be able to best tell us how to do that, and how to ensure that if there are things that fall under our obligation on this board, that those things would be made actionable as a part, or at least suggested to City Council to adopt as a part of the ordinance. And if there are things that are not, that would be clarified as well.
Yeah, I think in regards to that, that section, I believe it's 2-103, will tell us that our governance falls over anything that falls in violation of the 2-101. And again, this was something I really pursued with the city attorney, because I wanted to make sure that my thinking on it was correct. And so, maybe it's a matter of where it falls in the ethics ordinance, but it does tell us kind of where our governance lies. And,
Yes, 2-103 is clear on the provisions that it's clear on. What it's not clear on is everything that's contained in 2-99. So that's what I'm talking about. But yeah, point taken. Okay, I think, Mr. Baker, that you were up next for comments.
Oh, yeah, well, I was going to address 2-99, but we already kind of touched on that. I'm thankful that us as a board, we came together and we saw that we made a mistake and that we took the appropriate action to correct it. And I believe that's good. We are holding ourselves accountable and as we should. And, like Mr. Jones was saying, yeah, we had a discussion at a different meeting about like department heads and, so forth and so on, like who is governed by this ethics ordinance. And Ms. Doom, I want to thank you for, adding clarity to that. And, I think one of the things that I was just telling some of the members of the public at the other meeting was that, you guys as department heads and such have a right to follow your procedures as far as discipline and exercising discipline over your employees before it would come, potentially to us. You guys have a right to, you do your hiring, your firing, or, if you give somebody time off, that falls under your authority. And I think that was just one of the things that, we were just discussing. That's pretty much it. I'm just glad to see that we're all trying to do the right thing. I want to thank everybody, our members of the public for coming out. And I want to thank Otis, Mr. Gatson for, working diligently to get us this agenda and make everything happen within the correct time frame. I know he ran into some technical difficulties, and I appreciate him just letting us know about that and letting us know what was going on. And, so I'm just thankful to everybody who's doing, the hard work and just putting their time in to make sure that we can have a, efficient running meeting and a smooth running meeting. So thank you. And that is all that I have.
Okay. For myself, I just wanted to address a couple quick things. One, I just want to say thank you to the board for taking out the time to meet. When you are in the seat that that I was voted into, you got to take the fall, whether you think you're responsible or not. So, with respect to the misinformation in emails or whatever, I will totally take the fall for that. I did send out an email on, I think it was February 17th, and I didn't get any objections from any board members to that meeting time. And I did get a clear affirmation verbally from Ms. Tubman to that time. And the next email I got was last week saying from the city, yes, we can have it. So, I said, okay, as long as there's enough time, since I had no objections to the meeting, no one saying I can't meet on that date, I made an assumption that that was a yes. But you know what they say about assuming. So now going forward, I will ensure that I do not assume that you are consenting. And I would ask all of our board to just make sure that you reply just simple yes or no, or maybe not, just so that we can be clear going forward, and so that there is no assuming. And again, I want to say thank you to Mr. Gatson for working tirelessly over the weekend to work through the issues that you were having technically and to make sure that we got everything set up. So thank you very much for that. We really appreciate your assistance in that regard. With respect to the complaint form, my suggestion would be that we make a motion to revise the language on the complaint form, because it does say at the signature section that, this information, they're certifying that the information provided is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge. But if you're wanting something that's a little more stringent that would ward off people making unnecessary complaints, we may need to make a motion to request that the city attorney or Ms. Doom's office adjust that statement to include that there would be repercussions for misrepresentations or any sort of perjury. So maybe, at our next meeting or prior to that, but if someone would like to make a motion to that extent, that's probably the best way to get that form amended. I'm just looking at my notes, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. And then other than that, I just, I think I've already kind of said probably to exhaustion, my concern that the ordinance that we are following be as clear as possible, not just for us, but also for the citizens that we serve. and that whatever clarifications need to be made or additions need to be made to section 2-101 or 2-103, that those be made as soon as possible. And even if we need to get more advice from Mr. Albright or whomever, I just think the more clarity we have, the better, so that we work smarter, not harder. So that's all for me. Anyone have anything else?
So I guess I'll make that motion about the form. I guess I'd like to make a motion that more clarification be made, revised on the form about falsification on making comments.
Are we able to do it because we already approved the agenda and it wasn't added? I don't know if we can legally do that. So
Yeah,
I
we may
just-
need to have it as an agenda item in our next meeting. So what I will do, Mr. Jones, is make sure that it's added as an agenda item for our next meeting, which right now we don't have any complaints to address. So if we meet, we will be meeting specifically about this complaint form. And if we also at that time want to meet to have any further discussion about the ordinance, we can, but that I think is better relegated to a conversation between Ms. Doom and Mr. Albright at this point. So
That's fine. So, but now that they know that we're asking that, maybe they can come up with something, then we can just get it over with quick.
okay, so once they have more information to provide to us with respect to the ordinance, at that time, we would have a meeting also about the complaint form, but we will leave the complaint form as it stands. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's fine.
Okay, all right, so we'll just table that for now and know that once we come back to talk about the ordinance, we'll also revisit the language on the complaint form. All right, anything else? All right, I promise y'all a quick meeting. So with that being said, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved. So
Second.
moved.
Second.
All right. All right. Well, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you again, everyone, for your time and dedication. Thank you to Ms. Doom and Mariah and Mr. Gatson for your time, and to the members of public as well. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good one.
See you later. Have a good one.